Politicons, Chapter 11. Written and produced by Oliver Arnold. The next morning, Poling burst with energy. The Doumbs had been out and about since dawn, and she planned to organize them into units for building, farming, and breeding. From the three, reproduction was most important, as Poling required many workers for her ambitious projects. Fortunately, breeding was also the easiest one. Poling still couldn't understand how the beings multiplied so efficiently, but she knew from her own experience that this was one thing the Lord made easy. Poling contemplated the curious little ones scuttling about. These creatures were cute in their own alien way. The Doumbs' transparent skin revealed their colorful interiors of interconnected bladders, with shades of mostly blue and red. Poling watched as fluids wandered from here to there within the Doumbs, traversing but never blending. She knew people held such sacs and tubes also, but those hid behind the human's opaque skin and clothing. The Doumbs had transparent skin and were naked. The creature's insides looked not unlike the muscle suits many of the Politicons wore, but instead of air, the Doumbs held liquid. An unusual curiosity grasped Poling. At the top, intakes led to a system of bags, most notably a big blue one, and opposite it another equally sized red bladder. The blue bladder was filled in almost all the Doumbs, while the red one was empty. The liquids passing through vessels and tubes mesmerized Poling. They reminded Poling of the colorful, fluid office decorations she had seen. Despite all this admittedly gory stuff, the little guys were just so cute. She shouldn't show affection as their queen, of course, but what the heck? I must squeeze one, she thought. Pongo, come here. The little one plodded up to Poling. Yes, my queen? She grabbed and squeezed him. You're my favorite, Poling then said, whispering into the confused Doumb's ear. When Poling finally released the perplexed creature and Pongo took a step back, Poling startled. Oops! Her squeeze had distorted the Doumb's body, and now the Doumb looked like a cola bottle. Pongo caught Poling's stare. What is it, my queen? He asked. Oh, nothing, Poling said. She ran her eyes across Pongo's insides. The blue and red liquids had changed bladders. All the red was now in one bladder, and the blue had sunk to a lower bladder on the back. The red and blue liquids never mixed. What was the meaning of this? Come back here, Poling said commandingly, like a queen. The little Doumb obliged. Poling began pushing and squeezing his body in an attempt to mold it back into shape. All right, she said when she was finished. Pongo's body now appeared like a boxer's face after the 10th round. Enough of this, Poling said. It is time for our assembly. Gather your friends. When all the Doumbs had assembled a considerable crowd, Poling raised her voice and held up 2 branches. These are 2 sticks of wood, she said. Join very many of these to make a house. Yes, yes, Senator Poling, the Doumbs shouted excitedly. But how do we keep them together? Poling realized she didn't know. It was time to improvise. Use your spit, she said quickly, gesturing a licking motion at the sticks she held. The Doumbs imitated her, and it worked. Their goopy, adhesive saliva turned out to be ideal for this. Poling felt pride, but she couldn't indulge herself for long before the next question came. But, Senator Poling, how do we keep the rain out? This was a tough one. She said, rubbing her head. When a leaf fell out of her hair, she said, Use leaves. Good thing, Poling thought, that I made them sweep the forest. Figure out the rest for yourselves, she then commanded, and sent the Doumbs to their work sites with a wave of her hand. After the Doumbs were off, Poling settled by the beach to enjoy the remainder of her morning with her pet Manny. She had earned some rest. Not too much later, though, Pongo came running. Senator Sandra! Great calamity! The upset little creature took Poling by the hand and led her to the assembly location of their first house. Pongo's aggravation was evident, and Poling feared the worst. However, upon arrival, the building appeared undamaged. Yes, it was crooked and shoddily crafted, but these little beings had never built anything before. The site appeared suspiciously calm, though. There were no workers around, and Poling glanced at Pongo questioningly. Great tragedy! Oh, the blight! The little guy said, bouncing around as he was still very upset. When Pongo directed her around the building, she understood. The Doumbs had built themselves into the house with no doors or windows, and now they were trapped. She laughed, lifted the little structure, and scuttling out came a flood of dooms, leaving Pongo ever so grateful for Poling's wisdom and strength. He wouldn't shut up thanking her. What a delightful start. What a great day. Later, back on the other end of the village to be, Poling had settled into supervising the construction of her throne when Pongo came running once more. "Senator Sandra! Great calamity!" What little mischief had they found this time? She smiled soothingly and followed the panicked creature. Poling's happy face vanished when, even from afar, she saw the pools of blood along with dozens of impaled dooms. One was stuck on what appeared to be a bladed plow, and another on a board with razors arranged in a star-like pattern. "Oh, my lord, what happened?" Poling exclaimed. "All caught in traps," said Pongo, jumping up and down. Traps? They had built no traps, Poling thought. But then she understood. Ting Tong, their blacksmith, had carelessly set freshly forged blades and scissors on cooling racks, and many of the witless dooms had impaled themselves. After her initial disgust, Poling quickly realized that Pongo was right. The blacksmith had inadvertently built traps that would be useful in their hunt. Outstanding! After a speech on safety, Poling saw her hunters off. The bounty would be rich. The dead dooms were quickly replaced by Rub-Rub. In the afternoon, Poling and her tribe set up on the beach to test a newly built raft. The structure made of logs looked great and sturdy, even featuring a mast, and could easily navigate the high seas, Poling thought. Now that she had a comfortable life on the island, escaping was no longer her top priority, but it was nice to know that she could if needed. A crew of 4 doumbs manned the raft, with another 4 pushing it into the breaking seas. "Take the waves head on!" Poling directed her crew. She had witnessed scores of the little ones perish during earlier tests and didn't want to waste material. True, she could always order them to duplicate, but what if there was an unknown limit to their reproductive abilities? The raft took off, 2 doumbs per side, fighting through the surf. What a thrill! Manny barked and ran up and down the beach in his excitement. The dooms, meanwhile, had made it through their first wave. The sun was still strong. Were the dooms prone to sunburn? Perhaps their semi-transparent skin let the right amount of sunlight through, avoiding burns as on humans. They possibly even needed sunlight to cultivate algae on their insides. Poling noted to experiment on the matter later. The dooms aroused a curious scientific interest in Poling, an impulse for knowledge unbeknownst to her. As she pondered, the dooms took on their second wave. The rowers struggled mightily, but in the end were strong and heavy enough to push through the sizable breakers. They made it. Poling felt elated. For the first time, they had advanced into the open ocean without a single doom lost. True, after the initial struggle, the little ones were now scared witless and flocked to the center of the craft, but after only minutes, they had gained confidence and shot back to the edges, peeking down at the reef below. It was exciting for everyone. Suddenly, though, the vessel jolted. Perhaps they hit a submerged rock, thought Poling. "Watch out for reef heads!" she yelled, without expecting the little idiots to comprehend what that meant. She knew the sturdy logs would hold, but what if they got stuck far from the shore? The craft sure didn't appear immobilized, though, as it now spun. Perhaps a current had grabbed it. A mini maelstrom was at work here, Poling thought. The seafaring dooms stared fearfully into the water. "Use your paddles to push free," Poling yelled, rowing her arms. But the dooms kept on crying and pointing fearfully into the water. They gathered at the center of the craft and wouldn't go near the rails anymore. Poling became furious. "We will not lose another raft!" She yelled, she bellowed, she gestured, she threatened. It was of no use. Poling gave up and the scene turned quiet. Just then a head of slicked-back hair appeared in the water near the raft. Poling thought she saw a fatty, tanned face, complete with a 5 o'clock shadow and an Armani suit. Before anyone could react, the repulsive humanoid thing had lunged onto the deck and dragged one of the dooms into the sea. Poling knew what they were dealing with. "Hit them! Hit them!" Poling yelled at her crew, but events unfolded too quickly for an effective defense. Shark after shark now jumped the craft, picking off the dooms one by one. The fearful little critters held on to the mast for their very lives, in vain. In no time, they had signed up for loans they couldn't afford. Now the sea creatures jerked the raft, pulling it down with high APRs until it finally came apart and sank under loads of debt. Poling watched indifferently as the dooms vanished and furiously when the craft sunk. She kicked Manny. It was hard to be a queen, much harder than she'd imagined, and she had imagined it many times. It had been a long day. To be sure, not everything had gone smoothly, but there was nothing to be overly discouraged about. Building civilization was a learning process and a journey. Now, the survivors deserved a restful evening by the fire. That night, dinner was quiet. The recurring failures had affected Poling's mood, and she brooded, affectionately brushing Manny's thick pubic fur. At least he is happy, she thought. Manny had by now shed his suit completely and turned into a trusty, albeit mindless, companion. Well settled into his new life, he would bark at the dooms, herding them, even keeping them from killing themselves. He'd even learned to fetch game or retrieve sticks during the few light-hearted moments he and his queen were granted. "Are you my favorite dummy?" Poling asked her pet, but Manny only stared back idly, waiting for keywords like walk. She tossed him another shroom and then punished him for fun. No need for him to be too happy. Her eyes passed over the crowd of dooms that had joined her by the fire. She watched with unease how, even in this public setting, a great many dooms did rub, even during mealtime. "Man and woman should only hug the special way privately," she finally said with as warm a smile as she could muster. "What's a man?" a doom asked. "What's a woman?" asked another. Poling realized she had to start over from the very beginning, from A as in Abraham. Good. The dooms were a blank canvas to fill aplenty with rules and restrictions. "Tonight I want to talk to you about right and wrong," Poling said. "What's a right?" a doom said, shouting. "What's a wrong?" another inquired. "You must rub in private only. The Lord wants you to do it in secret." "But can the Lord not see us everywhere?" "Yes, but he knows not to look when you're in the bushes." The dooms nodded but appeared confused. Poling could see little liquid thoughts traversing their minds, literally as their heads were transparent. "But Senator Poling, at times 3, 4, or even 5 of us rub. "I don't need to know that," Poling said. Yet she couldn't help but wonder how that worked. Was rub feasible with only 2 of them, or 1, or were groups required? The thought intrigued her, and she took a mental note to verify this later. "Fear not," Poling replied while theatrically leaning forward, "for there is a mighty rule book yielding the answers to everything. We must know about it. We want to follow all of its rules. I will tell you all about it." The dooms hopped and danced ecstatically. Some wanted to make celebratory rub, but thought better of it. Poling was on a roll. She lectured the dooms for the better part of an hour. So many rules had amassed within her and were now bursting out. As Poling finished what she considered her closing argument, she noticed that a doom in the back had been more quiet and glaze-eyed than the others. Her glance kept returning to the little one. There was something else odd about him. He vibrated. Poling squinted. The doom now rattled and shook. His eyes had grown big. Was the Holy Spirit entering him? Or, gasp, the devil? She continued, "It's bad to rub in," and then stopped. Spittle flew off the violently shaking doom. "Pongo, is this normal?" Poling asked. The dooms rushing away from the rattler sure made it appear like it wasn't. "Sometimes happens," Pongo said. "Not good. Best go hide." "What is it, Pongo? Tell us what's going to happen," Poling said sharply with a raised voice. The shaking doum, meanwhile, had pushed up a lot of sand, so much so that it began to sink into the ground, like it was going to bury itself. Something terrible was going to happen, but Poling could not get any replies out of Pongo. When the dome was buried to his neck, the vibration finally stopped. Gasps of relief came from him and the crowd. Then suddenly he began moving again when a massive burst of energy streamed from his body, which then shot up into his head. It expanded like an overinflated balloon, turned cherry red but then deflated. The doom was visibly relieved. Poling didn't understand what she had just witnessed. Later in her bed, she pondered the day's events. The loan sharks, the preaching, the doom shaking and inflating. These events were somehow connected. There was more to the dooms than met the eye. She would study them. Their transparent skin made this easy. their colorful sacs inflating and deflating, their fear of water. Somehow it was all connected. Poling would get to the bottom of how these creatures functioned and why, and then use it to her advantage. Poling turned incessantly in her bed. She remembered a cave they had found a day prior. Suddenly all was clear. She would begin formal studies of the doumbs like a scientist, and the cave would become her lab. What if other Polis had found doumbs such as hers, had already uncovered their secrets, and were using them to their advantage? Not a second longer could she wait. This mystery had to be unraveled now. The competition wouldn't sleep, unless it was Gould. Getting ahead in doom science could mean the difference between life and death, victory and defeat. Poling jumped up and rushed outside, nighttime or not. When Poling arrived at the cave, she was running. Without fear of the ominous black hole opening of the cave, she boldly entered, kicking out a raccoon and then surveying the space. There, to the left, she would set up her restraining system. A natural hole in the floor on the other side would serve as the drain, and here this raised spot could become a workbench. The rear she would transfer into a pen. She beamed. Now that she had the space, she needed the other side of this equation. Pongo! Poling clubbed the hedges in search of doumbs. Not all little beings had houses yet, and even those who did, Poling knew, didn't always spend the night in them. Poling didn't have to search for long. The third bush she whacked held nearly a dozen. The half-sleeping creatures didn't know what hit them. It was her club. "Build a cage," Poling commanded. Pongo stepped forward. "But Senator Sandra," he said fearfully, "it is the middle of the night and frightfully dark." Poling grew furious at this resistance, but another whack quickly resolved any fears. Stout branches were cut and sized, and vines were trimmed for rope. Under Poling's watchful eyes and Manny's barks, the doumbs built a sturdy cage of their own size. Poling watched the doumbs impatiently as they built their own confinement. She could see the fluid sacs in their bodies move when she yelled at them, a green one when they were afraid, a blue one when they were hopeful. When it was nearly finished, with just one last wall to be fitted, Poling gestured for them to cease. "Install it from the inside," she commanded. "It will be better that way." You heard Politicons, Chapter 11, written and produced by Oliver Arnold.